Sup, my friends? John Baruti from Baruti Success coming to you tonight with how I made my first $100,000. How did I do it? Stay tuned. We're gonna find out. So, you want to know how I made my first $100,000? Well, Sally, the year is back in the 80s. Let's do the way back. The way back. Okay, sorry. I know some of you don't like doing that. I love it. All right, so let's do the Wayback Machine. I am in my 12, 13, 14 years old, and I am figuring out how to save money, okay? So that's how I started. What I had done is I worked for my mom and dad's restaurant. I helped them there, did busing. I helped them do some catering jobs. A little later, a few years later, I had worked at the boardwalk. I scooped ice cream. I started a landscape business with one of my best buddies. So all these things, side hustles, working my butt off, saving money left and right. That's how I saved my first $1,000, right? That's how I did it. Then my first $1,000, I did put it in the stock market. So picture this. Let's call it 1984, 85. I'm 13, 14, something like that. I'm going to be Alex P. Keaton. And if you don't know who that is, Mr. Millennial or Gen Zer, look it up. Family Ties, okay? So I'm reading Wall Street Journal, Financial Times. It's a pink newspaper. I'm watching Wall Street Week on PBS with Louis Rookhauser. I was the nerd of nerds, and I was going to be a bazillionaire by investing in penny stocks. So a buddy of mine in the neighborhood and I got the ingenious idea to start investing. Now, I think we're in an accounting class in high school at this time, I believe. And in the accounting class, they ran like a competition on who could make the most. And we kicked butt. We were awesome at it. So we figured we could do this in real life. So I took 1,000, he took 1,000, and I can't remember for the life of me, but we found this peach, this diamond in the rough, this $1,000 wearing suit guy, perfectly dressed. And again, I don't know how we found them, but we gave him our money. And we had told him, listen, we were looking into penny stocks. He goes, oh my God, guys, I'm the guy. I'm going to make you guys a ton of money. We gave him all the money. It was $2,000 combined. If you've ever seen the movie Boiler Room, if not, go and Google it, right? That's basically what we were in the middle of. This guy was the head of that movie, probably. Not really, but he should have been. Took our money and ran to the mountains with it. Lost every penny of it. That's not how I made my first $100,000. I know you're probably thinking, oh, well, John loves investing, and he probably made his first $100,000 investing and putting money in ETFs and all these great stocks like IBM and AT&T, and yeah. No, I didn't do that back then. That being said, that was probably one of the best lessons I learned in probably, it was a terrific time because I learned it at that age. I knew there were ways to make money in the stock market. My heroes were Warren Buffett, Jack Bogle, Charles Schwab. You know, these guys were heavy hitters. They still are. But back then, these were the stock pickers of the world. They were phenomenal guys. And listen, they said, buy good companies and hold them. Yeah, I didn't do that. I didn't do it. I wanted to get rich quick. That's what I wanted. I wanted my money now. That's what I wanted. And I didn't get it. So I hate to, disappoint Sally, but I didn't get it in investing. That wasn't the way I did it. So I basically was part of a pump and dump scheme, and me and my buddy were part of the dumping side of the pump and dump. And, we took our lumps. Again, we learned valuable lessons and we moved on. And listen, later in life, I still invested in the stock market and I did very well. I had an aunt and uncle that had grew up in the Depression age. They were dear aunt and uncles to me, and they got burned back in the Depression area. And they never never really invested again in the stock market. And that was a shame because they were terrific savers. They saved, they put their money in CDs, and they did very well for themselves. They lived very modestly, put every penny in the bank. And if they just would have put it in a simple S&P 500 or some sort of, they didn't have ETFs back then, but even in a basket of great stocks, they would have been multi-millionaires. They were still millionaires, and they did well, like I said, but they could have done so much better. But it probably doesn't matter because they weren't travelers and they didn't spend money. But I always talked to my aunt and uncle, and I just was frustrated with them because they could have done so much better. But when you get burned like that, it could be devastating to you. And I didn't get devastated. And I can only implore you to invest smartly in stocks. But again, this isn't that video. This is one how I made my first $100,000. But no, after I made my first $100,000, I did invest in stocks. Okay, so here we go. So if it wasn't investment, John, how did you make your first $100,000? How? Tell us. All right, Sally, calm down. George, I see you back there. Just relax. Sit down. I'm getting to it. So now that I've been burned, now I'm gonna figure out this finance thing. I'm going to make money, right? Because I know that you can make money. So I was in accounting in high school, and I was getting a little older, and I'm like, well, what do I want to do for college? So I'm like, I like this accounting thing. Let's try that. So I went to, I don't think it was a summer class. I think it was a winter class at the local community college while I was in high school. And I took an accounting class because I wanted to know if I was going to like it. And I took the accounting class, and I actually loved it. It probably was because I didn't have to worry about my grades because I wasn't actually in college. I just wanted to take the class to learn. And, I took it. I loved it. So fast forward. So now I'm graduating high school. I've been accepted to Seton Hall. I've been accepted to the Stillman Business School, which is within Seton Hall. I'm going to make my first $100,000 being an accountant. That's what I'm going to do. So I got in first or second semester, I don't remember. Got my first accounting class. Yeah, not doing that. When I actually was in college, and now, things mattered, what my grades were going to be, and I got into the first accounting class. Yeah, didn't like it. No, I'm not a bean counter. Not a bean counter. Figure that out real fast. But I wanted to be in the money world. So I went and talked to the professor and this isn't for me. What do you think? He's like, well, you like the action, you like finance, you like the money. So finance should be your gig. I'm like, of course, finance. Why didn't you think of that? Of course, stock market, finance. So I switched my major, and here I go. Finance is the way I'm going to make my first $100,000, right? I'm off to the races. So now I graduate. It's 1991. Okay, I graduate, and stock market's not doing good. It's not doing good. It's poopy. So I look for finance jobs, and all the really great finance jobs are gone, first of all. Second of all, I couldn't really go and interview with Goldman Sachs and the high up guys because, I wasn't finished paying. I graduated, but I didn't really pay my last couple semesters because, I was broke. My mom and dad didn't have enough money, and I was basically working myself through school. So, I digress. They wouldn't release my transcripts. Yes, I finished school, eventually paid for it, but at the time, I could not get my transcripts, and the upper finance companies, Goldman Sachs, all those guys, they didn't want to talk to you unless you can get their transcripts. So what I could get into was the Boiler Room style. And again, if you never saw that movie, go and Google it, go and look it up on YouTube. And the other thing was being a bean counter finance guy in companies like Ingersoll Rand, Caterpillar, GE, all these big companies. They needed finance guys, but you were basically a bean counter. That's what you were. And that wasn't my gig. So, what does a newly graduated son of an immigrant father do in this situation? Yeah. Hello, Daddy? Yes, Giovanni. Well, Dad, I think I want to be an entrepreneur. Let's go into business together. And he's like, okay, you will come home. We'll talk about it. So I come home and Mia talk about it. And he's like, well, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I'm still doing, so let me back up. To get myself through college, I had to pay for it. So I did multiple things. I bounced, I drove exotic cars, I did many things. But the one thing that I did to make the most money was I drove a bread truck. A buddy of my dad's got into business, bringing bread from Newark, New Jersey down to Tom's River Brick, where my dad's restaurant was. And he needed a driver. So way back in the beginning of freshman year, of college, I started driving for him part-time. Did it all through the summers, and I did it part-time. So I was still driving while I was, even after I graduated college. So I was driving a bread truck to get through college. And when I had come home to talk to my dad, he's like, well, what are you thinking? What kind of business are we going to go in? And I said, well, I work for my buddy Greg, my dad's buddy Greg, and I deliver to all these restaurants. Why don't we sell them product from Italy? My dad was from Italy. He had a lot of contacts. He had a friend that was starting up an import-export business. I'm like, why don't we piggyback off of Paolo and see if we can import tomatoes, olive oil, cheese, you name it, we imported it, we sold it. And he's like, okay, my dad spoke Italian. It was a perfect marriage. I already knew the customers. So we're off and we're running. Me and my dad start what's called CC Distributing. We're distributing Italian products all over the Jersey Shore, up and down the coast, okay? So that was terrific. You're probably saying, John, is that how you made your first $100,000? No, Sally, it wasn't. And I'm gonna tell you why. Because for the first year, I graduated college, I'm doing the bread route thing. Now remember the bread route thing, because that's gonna play into this story later. But I'm doing the bread route thing. Me and my dad are starting this import-export business. We're doing the distribution to all these restaurants, delis and bodegas and supermarkets and stuff. And then year 2 comes. And I go into work one day. It's at my dad's restaurant. We had an office there. And my dad was on the floor. And he had passed out and he was in convulsions. My dad had an aneurysm. We rushed him to the hospital. They said he was going to be fine. And unfortunately, he passed away that night. My dad was 49. I was 23. The year was 1992. So here I am. My dad's 49. I'm 23. Business is doing well, but basically we're putting every ounce of this money that we're making back into the business, right? To buy more product, to do more things, and so on and so forth. And that's not good. That wasn't good. So I had to stop the business because I was an idiot and I couldn't speak Italian, which was all of our contacts. And I had to sell the business. And I sold it for pennies on the dollar. So what am I going to do? I'm 23 years old. We no longer have a restaurant because my dad was everything, the chef, the candle maker, he was the everything. So we had to close our restaurant and we had a lot of bills. And my mom and my sister were all very scared because we had a ton of bills. We had no income at the time except for my little bread route, right? That I was working with a buddy of mine. So fast forward a few months, everything settled down. We brought my dad back to Italy. We brought his ashes back. When we came back from Italy, my buddy had said, hey, why don't we sit down? Are you interested in buying part of the route? And I said to him, well, sure. I mean, I know the customers. I know the business. It makes sense. I'm not really fond of getting up at 1 o'clock in the morning, 12 o'clock at night, but sure, I'll buy part of the business. And I went to a dear aunt and uncle of mine, the ones that I mentioned before, the depression baby aunt and uncle, and I asked them if I could borrow a short-term loan, which they had said yes, that I had to basically sign away my life because they weren't sure if I was, going to make it. I wasn't sure if I was going to make it. I knew I would pay them back hook or crook, but, they weren't sure, and God bless them, they had the faith in me. So I borrowed money from family, and I bought a part of a bread route. So I bought that route basically for 1 time's net earnings, right? Which was probably in the $50,000 range, something like that. So that's what I bought it for, and that was in 1993 is when I bought that. So I bought that in 1993, doing $3,500 a week. So within the first short period of time, we were doing a lot of money per week. So, I was basically throwing money into the safe as fast as I could. So now I'm living with my mom. My dad passed away. I was not happy about my mom living alone, so I moved in. We shared bills. I was very close with my mom, so, we're going to support each other, and that's what we did. And from that point, so my mom worked with my dad for 15 years, 16 years. They had the restaurant. And when my dad passed away, my mom worked with me. We worked together from 1992-93 to 2020. So how long is that? 28 years? 28 years? Until I retired my mom in 2020. And then shortly this year, 2022, my mom passed away in July, which was devastating. My mom was 80 years old. We worked together my whole life. My mom was very dear to me. My mom was a big part of my success through my whole career. But to get back to it, so I have this business. I'm doing very well. I'm socking away a ton of cash because me and my mom are living together, I'm putting a ton of cash away. So, Sally, I put away $100,000 in cash in a short period of time of starting the business. So, how did I save my first $100,000? This isn't how I made, in revenue $100,000. This is how I saved $100,000. It was from buying a business. I bought a business that was doing okay, and I exponentially grew that business, and that is exactly how I saved my first $100,000. I probably made my first $100,000 the first year of business as far as, revenue wise, but saving, like netting $100,000 probably took me about 2 years. And I did that by buying a business. That's why I express in my YouTube channel entrepreneurship, buying and selling businesses. This is how America was built, my friends, girls and boys. So, buying a business, working hard. It's, everybody, nobody wants to do labor anymore. That's why it's so hard to find employees. That being said, if you can buy an undervalued or even a valued business that somebody is looking to get out of, it is a good thing to do. And I am a perfect example of that. And that is basically how I saved my first $100,000. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. This hopefully was a short one. And my next one is going to be how I made my first million. And that one is from the bakery. I didn't mention the bakery. I just talked about the distribution. Whole nother story, whole nother video. So let's stay tuned for that one. All right. We'll see you on the next one.
I made $100,000. I was a rich man. I wasn't really rich, but I liked the money. But we'll see you on the next one.